This week on Quality Digest Live, we're going to be talking to Scott Paton of Exemplar Global. And for some of you old-timers, he may look a little bit familiar. He was the publisher of Quality Digest for
20-some years.
20-some years, wow.
There you go.
Sometime.
That's right. Plus, we have another great interview with you. We're going to chat with Chad Kymal of Omnex Inc. about ISO 45001. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for April 6th, 2018. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
Yes, he is, and I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. And you know, Dirk, April showers make May flowers.
Is it raining behind us? It is raining behind us.
I should tell you that.
Yeah, it's only electrical stuff back there. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it, okay. Pay no mind. All right, well, we're going to kick off the show this week with a look at the auditing function with our friend Scott Paton of Exemplar Global. Yep. Scott, thanks for joining us. Scott, as many of you may remember, is the former publisher of Quality Digest. So he knows a lot of you and a lot of us. So auditing is a tough job, but it's a critically important one because we know auditors of standards like ISO 9001 ensure that organizations are meeting the requirements of those standards. And naturally, those organizations want, and many of them need, to be registered. But more importantly, I think auditors help them keep their systems running smoothly to deliver the highest possible quality and value to customers. Auditors themselves are highly trained professionals who take a hard but fair look, I think, at subject organizations according to the requirements of a given standard. In doing so, they assist in surfacing the issues that can negatively affect quality outcomes. Training and certification auditors themselves are their important part of the process because these individuals are a key cog, perhaps they are the key cog in organizations getting maximum benefits from registration to standards. So, to tell us more about auditing and auditor certification, we're pleased, as I mentioned, to welcome Scott Paton, Business Development and Technical Manager of Exemplar Global, to our show. Scott, after that long intro, thank you for joining us. Finally, you get a chance.
Thanks for having me.
Now you got to leave.
That's right, that's right.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. Well, you know, you're a standards guy. Standards has been something you've known about registration for a long time. So what's kind of the going on now? Of course, there's been a kind of an interesting couple of years with ISO 9001 being launched in 2015. So what are you seeing, and what's your perspective on the standards world these days?
Well, I guess the biggest change in the standards world is change itself. We've got NXSL, which came out before 9001 was revised, and all of the new management system standards are built on NXSL, which is more commonly known as the high-level structure. And that's caused a lot of change because all of the management system standards going forward will now be based on it. So 9001 is based on it, 14001, 22001, the new 45001 occupational health and safety standard. The exception is 13485 for medical devices because the revision process started before the high-level structure was released. So they're a little bit of an exception, and we don't know what that will do to their revision cycle. So there's a lot of change going on, and there's a lot of change going on all at once because 9001, 14001, 13485 are all coming due very soon. 9001, 14001, September of this year, you must have made the transition both as an organization and as an auditor because Exemplar Global and the other personnel certification bodies are requiring you to upgrade your certification so that you're competent to audit to the new standard.
And how are users adapting or accepting these changes? Are they pulling their hair? Are they screaming, running from the building?
Well, to some degree, yes. It's been interesting. We've been watching these numbers of organizations that have made the transition, and as little as I think 3 or 4 months ago, or less than 40% had actually made the transition to the new 9001 standard. Wow. I believe now it's closer to 60%. But that still leaves a whole lot of organizations, hundreds of thousands of organizations globally who have yet to transition to the new standard. So there's only about 6 months left in which to do so. So I know accreditation bodies, certification bodies are kind of pulling their hair out, wondering what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. How about auditors themselves? I mean, as you say, they need to get up to speed on the new requirements of the standard too. So
they do, yes. And Exemplar Global, I can only speak to what we're doing. You know, we've had a transition process in place for a number of years now. Auditors have to complete an assessment, and they also have to complete audits to the new standard in order for us to fully upgrade them to the 9001 certification. The majority of our auditors have done that, which is good news, but we are getting some feedback from them that because there aren't enough organizations that have made the transition, they're having a difficult time getting the number of audit hours that we and other bodies are requiring them to have in order to be fully competent to the new standards. So there's a lag in the process.
So it sounds like there's a need for auditors, obviously.
Oh, definitely.
So
yes.
what would you do to encourage, if somebody's looking for a career change, what would entice somebody to want to be an auditor?
Well, now is a great time to be an auditor.
Because there's lots of work.
There's lots of work out there. Certification bodies are hungry for auditors, particularly in specialized fields, aerospace, medical devices, automotive. They're having a very difficult time finding qualified and competent people to audit for them. And in fact, I've talked with some CBs who've told us we've had to postpone audits because we simply don't have enough auditors.
Wow.
And what are some of the attributes? I mean, what makes a good auditor? I mean, if you wanted to get into this field, what are some of the things that you would want to have and know about?
Well, at Exemplar Global, we look at a whole variety of different things to determine an auditor's competence. And competence is this big question mark that's out in the industry now. If you talk to a body like Jazance from Australia, New Zealand, or ANAB here in the United States, they're very concerned about the competence of auditors. And as are we, because that's our job, to demonstrate an auditor's competence to a potential employer. So we look at your work experience, we look at your education experience, we look at the types of audits that you've done, your role in the audit process, how many audit hours you have, and then we also look at your personality attributes, which is, do you have the right personality to even be an auditor? Is this a field you should be working in? So we've developed something called our work style assessment, which is a personality attributes tool, which is based on ISO 19011.
Mm-hmm. So it basically just uncovers and surfaces some of those things so you and the auditor themselves, the person themselves, can know if it's kind of a fit for what they want to get into.
Absolutely. We look at things like coachability, dominance, aggression, responsibility, a whole host of different attributes, and we do a quick little 15-minute online assessment, which is a bit deceiving because you wouldn't think 15 minutes is that long in order to learn so much about you. But because we partnered with an organization that specializes in building these assessments for large corporations, it's named CalentClick, and they're actually up in Vancouver. They built a psychometrically sound, very valid assessment of your attributes. And when you get your report back, it not only tells you where you fall on the scale of all these different attributes, it gives you some input, like this is what potential coaching you might need. This is what the type of job that you might be a best fit for. As an employer, when you get the copy of the employer's report, it gives you suggested questions to ask when you're interviewing someone. So it's a very useful tool, not just for the auditor, but for the potential employer of the auditor.
So do auditors typically work on their own, like are freelance, or do they typically work directly for a registrar, whoever it might be?
Both.
Okay.
A lot of registrars or certification bodies contract with auditors. Very few of them have a full-time staff of auditors.
Okay.
Most of them have a mix of a few paid staff and then mostly contractors.
Okay. So if you're looking for your own type of, kind of, we talk about the gig economy, your own gig. I mean, an auditor might be one, and they could work for maybe BSI one time.
Absolutely.
And a completely different registrar or certification body than another time, right?
And many of them do. When we survey our auditors, I think the majority of them are actually working for 2 or more certification bodies.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And the personality stuff, just getting back to the assessment of that, and that's important because, I mean, it's a personal thing. I mean, it's a science to it. I mean, obviously you're going through a document, you're trying to make sure that there's a compliance to that, to the requirements, but there's also a certain amount of how shall I say this? There's a personal interaction, a transaction that goes into that as well. So an auditor is being able to have the ability to understand and maybe look beyond just what's on the paper, maybe is valuable as well.
Absolutely, and that's a nice thing about the report that we give you, because it does take a dive into what does this mean to me as an auditor, what does it mean to my potential employer. And the other thing that's really nice about it is beyond just an individual look, you can get access to the data as a certification body. So if you contract with us to do these personality assessments for all of your auditors, you can then take a look at, well, where does Auditor X fall against the wider auditor pool that I employ? So you might say, oh, well, Auditor X might need some additional coaching and development work, or Auditor Y might be a great potential mentor for Auditor X. Well, it also tells you, well, we might be able to develop some new products or tools based on the results that we're seeing. And the other really exciting piece of this is you also have the capability to look not just at your own auditors, but the auditors from the entire auditor pool that we certify. So now you can see where your auditor falls against potentially 10,000 folks around the world, and how you compare against your competition and how your auditors compare against your competition.
Interesting.
So it's a very cool tool.
Very useful.
Yeah.
So now you actually have another interesting thing coming up, your International Auditor Symposium, right? Is
Yes.
the name of the event? And that's an online event that's happening in May, I believe it is. Really interesting. So talk us a little bit about what that is and what the user might be interested in learning about it we get.
Sure. Well, in our efforts to make auditors more competent, we like to give them some education. So we developed this online conference last year, kind of as a lark. You know, we didn't know what we were doing, but we ended up having 1,000 people attend.
Whoa, okay.
So it turned out very well. We had 14 presenters in our first year. This year we decided to put a little bit more muscle behind it, a little bit more marketing behind it, and we're expecting several thousand people to attend. We've got some nice sponsors who've agreed to help us with the event. Omnex, DNV, SAI Global, ASQ, our parent company, is also sponsoring the event. So we're going to have more than 40 presenters.
Wow. Very impressive roster.
Yes.
It's all online?
All online. It's open 24/7 for that 2-week period. It's free if you're an Exemplar Global certified auditor, and it's only $99 if you're not. So it's very cheap.
Cheap, yeah.
And it's a good way of you getting exposure to a lot of these new concepts, new standards that are coming out. And you can also do a little bit of networking because we're putting some online commenting tools in there. And
a lot of content. Like I say,
Yeah.
a lot of
A lot of
presenters, a lot of
content.
content, and the roster of presenters is very impressive.
yes.
I mean, a lot of really, really good people with a lot of expertise, deep roots in the standards.
Yeah, and we've got 6 different tracks this year. We've got quality, environment, food, occupational health and safety, auditor skills, and integrated management systems.
So for those in the audience that are watching, I mean, people that you would want to maybe come to this event would be obviously some clients already of Exemplar Global,
Sure.
but people that also maybe are just interested in learning more about auditing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you can just go to the Exemplar Global website, exemplarglobal.org. There's a giant link on there. It'll take you right to the conference site, and you can register.
That's great. That's
Cool.
great. Well, Scott Paton, thanks. A quick 10
My
minutes there,
pleasure.
12 minutes. Thanks for joining us on the show. We'll, again, encourage everyone out there to go out to the site and check it out. It's exemplarglobal.org, yes?
Exemplarglobal.org.
As he said.
Click on the link, and you'll go right there.
In fact, why don't we put up that slide there? You can at least see the name,
There you go,
Exemplar,
Exemplar Global.
Exemplar Global.
Global.org is the name of the company, and you can check it out. So again, Scott Paton, thanks so much for joining us on the show today, and we'll see you down the line. All right, well, talking about organizations, Dirk, and you know this, I think organizations everywhere, they're awash in data, they're awash in information, they're awash in analytics, and by the way, those 3 things are not exactly the same. Did you know that?
Information, data, and analytics. Not the same.
Well, actually, I think it really goes in the order of data, information, and analytics.
Okay, sure.
I mean,
Yep,
it's kind of
one is just
a progression,
stuff,
raw,
one is
raw to process,
yeah, okay,
kind of
gotcha.
is how that works. Okay. Now, gathering up these things is important, but what's really important is what you do with them. That's what really counts. And a recent article that examines this very issue is titled "Everyday Analytics" by business leader and performance excellence consultant Ryan Mandel. The piece first appeared last month on the Smart Brief blog, and we republished it in Tuesday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. Mandel's key takeaway here is that if analytics are to be truly useful across the entirety of an organization, then they need to be made simple for the rank and file. Now, not every organization, as Mandel points out, employ data scientists and analytics experts. So if you don't have those kind of people with that expertise in your organization, how do you share and have people understand the analytics that you're coming up with, the data that you confirm that you're turning into information that you're turning into analytics? How do you know what that means?
We had this discussion with Tim Lozier of ETQ the other day.
we have it internally all the time too. It's like, do we know what this means? I mean, and so that's a really important piece of this. So the question, of course, is then how can companies more easily share the most pertinent information and take fullest advantage of the opportunities to learn from the analytics that comes from that? And Mandel suggests a couple of actions that I think are pretty valuable. First, he says you should really narrow down what you need to know. I mean, there's lots of noise in the signals that emerge from even a small organization when it comes to data points. We know that. We're not in a very big organization here at Quality Digest, but we have a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of analytics, and we need to pare through it and look at what the really important pieces of that is and find the signal in the noise. I mean, you want to talk to your frontline people about what they're doing and what they need to know better to do their jobs in the best possible way. That's really important. Don't forget about what the people that are doing the work need to know. Sometimes you gather all this information, these analytics, and you say, this is great, we know all this stuff, and the frontline person says, that's great, it doesn't really apply to what I'm doing. So maybe you need to gather information for that person. That's really a key thing. Another suggestion that Mandel offers is to not forget about the so-called domain expertise, which is superior knowledge or insight about something of importance to the organization. By combining real-time informational analysis with this type of experiential insight, organizations can get the best of both worlds because neither data nor experience in and of itself is as effective. I mean, think about what he's saying there. I mean, there was for many years this idea that these domain expertise was the be-all and end-all. You had somebody who had experience, 20 years worth, and that's the go-to guy or go-to gal. Right. They know what needs to be done. Well, that's kind of moved away from that, more into this era now of, in God we trust, all others bring data. So now we're in that era more, and the domain expertise has kind of maybe gone by the wayside. But it's valuable to merge those two things together. Look at the data, try to see what it's saying, and then run it by the people that have 20 years of experience and say, hey, does this make sense? Do a sanity check on it. Because you may find, well, yeah, that is going on, and that's true, but really the key thing is this piece of it here, from my experience, that I think is really valuable. Right. That's important to bring those people into because they have the expertise. And always remember, I think analytics are not a goal into themselves. This is really important. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know if you've arrived. So you have to look at analytics as a piece of a broader thing. It's almost counterintuitive that you're going to start with a question before you start, or you're going to start with an answer you want before you start asking the questions, but you have to kind of know where you want to go, right? If you don't know where you want to go, all the analytics in the world aren't necessarily going to tell you what you need to know about getting there. So you start with a destination in mind, and then you begin to go backward.
And I think one thing that's woven in there, although I don't know if Mandel pointed out explicitly, is very often companies or organizations will collect data, and they'll have their employees collect the data for them, field data or that sort of stuff, and they don't tell them why they're collecting it. And so the employees, it's and I know because I know people who work in a certain field who are required to fill out all this information, and they don't know why they're collecting it. So for them, it's like busy. It's like, why am I doing this? It's like, it takes me forever to fill out this form, and I've got to do all this stuff. And so if you don't know if the employee doesn't know what they're collecting the data for, they're not going to be very inclined, number one, to collect it or to collect it very well.
Carefully.
You really want them to understand how this data they're collecting, how it's inputting into the overall process and why it's important, what will be done with that data, how it might help their lives better if they collect. But if you're keeping them in the dark or just collect this data, they have, well, what's the incentive for doing it? Other than it's just busy work, right?
Exactly right, exactly right. And that's a key point here too.
Yeah, all right.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, let's move on. We were talking about standards earlier, auditor training. Well, there is another standard that was just released. That's ISO 45001, which is the much anticipated ISO-based International Occupational Health and Safety Standards, which was published just a few weeks ago, mid-March, I believe. So until now, the go-to standard for occupational health and safety has been the British Standards Institution's OSAS 18001. Most of you have probably heard of that. that. And although it's closely aligned to ISO 45001, OSAS 18001 isn't an ISO standard, but a consensus standard used worldwide by organizations that want an OH&S management system. And along with 18001, you can add ANSI Z10. Some people are familiar.
It's a little confusing.
It's a little confusing. There's several of them out there. Well, according to our next guest, who we interviewed earlier in the day, getting everyone to agree on what needed to be in ISO 45001 took about 5 years. It was not an easy process. There was a lot of disagreement early on, but we have finally arrived. And in an interview that we recorded earlier today, we learned more about ISO 45001 and what it means for companies. All right, and here to tell us all about it is Chad Kymal of Omnex. Chad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Mike. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us, Chad. Let's start off in a nutshell. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what ISO 45001 exactly is.
Well, I tell you, the key that everybody is talking about is that first global agreement on health and safety, and the first ISO standard around it. And I mean, that is the big news. Then, of course, also that it follows the high-level structure of ISO 9001 and ISO 14001.
And this is, I mean, the 45001, though, this is an occupational health and safety standard. So how is it different from was it BSI 18001 or whatever that one is?
That's
and
right.
I think there's an ANSI Z10. There's a couple other standards out there. How does this differ?
Let me just sort of walk you through all these different standards. So the OSHA's 18001, many people don't know, are ISO standard. And by the way, if you go back to the history of ISO standards, they tried to create a ISO health and safety standard and they failed twice. They were watered down twice. So this almost went down the same way, but I'll talk to you about that maybe a little later. So 18001, OSHA's 18001 and ISO 45001 are different because this standard has, number one, the high-level structure. So as you know, the 9001 and 14001 all have the high-level structure. And if I go down that path, I'll take the rest of the interview. So I'll just say that. Second is it focuses on eliminating hazards and tied to what is called the hierarchy of controls. And whereas the 18001 focused more on risk. Third is, because of the international forces, there's more expanded what they call consultation and participation. When they say that, it's always about labor. And what we can also say, there's a key word in here I thought is very interesting. When you do the hazard analysis, they want you to look at social factors. Things like that they added workload, they added harassment, they added bullying, they added victimization. So I was very interested in seeing an international standard using that language, but I think very appropriate. I expanded supplier management role and looking at hazards for contractors and outsource. As you know, the worst jobs in a factory are given to contractors and outsourced workers. So this standard, it was there in 18001, but this really expands it. So in a nutshell, those are the key differences, Dirk.
Okay, and you in your article, you write that this was not an easy standard to get passed. I believe you said you guys worked on it for like 5 years or something like that. Why was this so difficult?
Well, number one, I didn't tell you much about ANSI Z10. So ANSI Z10, the United Nations, the UN, has ILO, International Labor Organization, feels that they have a big role to play, and they wrote a OSH standard called the ILO OSH, which decreed to all the different countries to follow the ILO OSH, and the ANSI Z10 sort of follows that format. So here are these different power centers, plus labor or organized labor, we call unions, are also heavily participating in writing the standard. So this is one standard where there's a number of different forces at work, and it almost failed again. So the CD1 had so many different comments, and by the way, some countries refused to vote even because they said, we disagree that there should be an ISO global standard. Companies like Germany, and a couple other European companies. So they're not sort of, some country that, doesn't understand ISO standards. So CD1 went into CD2, which has changed draft 2. Many, many comments. We spent a lot of time getting that into a DIS. And then they spent extra time getting all the countries together. And believe it or not, after that, it sailed through. There was wide agreement. And everybody said, we cannot let 5 years worth of work go to waste. And in the US, the ANSI Z10 folks are the folks writing the ISO 45001. So that's what's going on.
So here in the U.S., I mean, we talked about occupational health and safety. Probably what leaps to everybody's mind is OSHA. Well, OSHA does that, right? And there's OSHA rules and regulations and laws, right? So
right.
I'm a little unclear on how ISO 45001 or even the earlier 18001, how those coordinated with OSHA anyway, or did they? Are they just two completely separate things, and one just helps you get to another? I mean, what's the relationship?
Yeah, I just mention, as you probably know, I'm on the PC 283, which is the writing committee for the 45001. And in my past, I've also been, I ran a registrar for 10, 12 years. And the first standard that we had to really tussle with this idea of regulations versus management systems was ISO 14001. And the US went into great lengths to say, hey, compliance is compliance. Here's a management system standard, it's a conformance standard, policy and objectives, management review, corrective action, and so on. So that's what you're seeing with 45001. It's a great tool for compliance. Well, compliance touches 45001 in two different ways. One is you need to know all the requirements. And second is you have to do compliance audits. So that's the only way, really. And when I was part of the registrar, I gave great guidance to auditors not to become, not even have the customer perceive us as being as part of regulatory in any way, because we want to make sure, especially in the US, companies understand OSHA is something very different. A management system is very different, where you're looking to see that you have a system in place and it's working towards continual improvement. And by the way, if I didn't mention it, let me mention it now. It says eliminate hazards. That's the goal of the standard.
And Chad, do you think that the framework, however, of ISO 45001, compliance to ISO 45001, does that understanding make OSHA compliance easier for companies that are involved with that?
I definitely believe so. And this is also what the OSHA folks feel, that 45001 is a great benefit to them. And it should be a comfort to top management to know there's a system looking at, with the policy from top management, driving it and throughout the company. And that's also something for 14001 and 45001. We need to make sure it is a company effort versus a single one or two people effort. Yes, absolutely, Mike.
Okay, well, Chad, thanks for joining us this morning. We are going to be, we're going to give people information on a webinar that you're going to be talking about the new 45001 standard. Maybe just tease for us really quick a couple of the highlights that you're going to touch on that webinar.
I'm going to talk about the history. I'm going to talk about the key issues that we were faced with as the PC 283, and then I'll talk about the standard itself, and then we'll talk about deadlines and implementation.
Perfect.
That's the plan.
All right. Well, Chad Kymal, CTO of Omnex, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Mike. Always a pleasure being with you guys.
All right, terrific.
Thank you, Chad. We'll see you on Tuesday.
So long.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, there you go. Is it live or is it memorized? That's right. That was Chad Kymal, who's the CTO and founder of Omnex, talking about ISO 45001. Interesting topic. And if you're interested in that, you'll want to be sure to register for the webinar. ISO 45001, released as an international standard, coming up on Tuesday, April 10th, next Tuesday, and this coming Tuesday, at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Chad's going to be your presenter, and Dirk right over there is hosting. So be sure to register for what should be a very informative and educational webinar for all you out there interested in occupational health and safety.
Okay.
So Dirk, get to our off script, because I know this is a good one. You've been dying to get to this one.
This is going to be really quick because we have a whole lot of time. So one of the big articles in the news the last week or so has been the whole dust up with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and the whole data sharing, data vacuuming thing going on with Facebook. Carol Sandburg, COO of
Sandburg, right.
Facebook, has been doing a lot of interviews right now, kind of as a run-up to Mark Zuckerberg, coming before Congress to talk about what's been going on with Facebook and what they plan to do about it. A lot of mea culpa, honestly, going on, which rightfully so. But my question is this. There's been a lot of news about our data being shared without our knowledge, sometimes being shared by one company sharing it with another, in the case of, let's say, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. There's also been data hacking, where your data is actually being stolen. Other than intellectually, do you think people really are that worried about it? I mean, you don't see like all of a sudden, I'm not going to go on, I'm not going to use PayPal anymore. I'm going to stop shopping on Amazon or eBay. I'm still going to go out and use my whatever app I'm using for my gigs. If I'm some sort of a freelancer and stuff. You don't see that going away. So it's almost like people, but I'm going to keep going on life as usual. I mean, what do you feel? Do you worry about it?
No, I don't. I don't worry about it. I'm in the media business. We are. So I understand, I think, on a small level, how a lot of this data is being used. It's mostly just being used to sell. And I don't really care. I don't really care about getting sold to. So I'm not.
Right.
I mean, the question comes down to the core of the question is how important is privacy? Right. How important is privacy to a society? This is an argument that's been going on for a long time. I mean, the Constitution, our Constitution doesn't really talk specifically about a right to privacy. It's inferred in some of the language of the Constitution. There's a right to privacy. Right. It doesn't actually come out and state
that. Well, and it comes up in certain laws. It does. Certain media law, for instance.
It does, as it's evolved, right. Yeah. So it's an ongoing, my point is that it's an ongoing evolution of ideas about this. And the idea of privacy being a major thing, especially as it relates to media companies that have so much power. I mean, I heard Sheryl Sandberg talking about this. They have like 1 billion customers around the world, right? That's a lot of power, and they take that seriously, the power they have over that data. I mean, we have a fraction of that data in Quality Digest. People that register, thank you, all the other, for registering Quality Digest.
All 10 of you, thank you.
And we market. I mean, we're upfront about that. I mean, if you register to Quality Digest, you're going to get ads. I mean, that's our business model, right? Yeah. But that's also Facebook's business model. You have to remember that. Whenever I think about this and hear Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg talking about this, I don't think that people understand that it's not just, we as users, we need to protect our privacy. This is their business model. Their business model is taking data and selling it and selling ads against it. And hopefully what they're trying to do with their sophistication and their army, literally, of engineers and programmers is to try to make those ads as useful and as unobtrusive as possible.
So the question is then do we accept that I am going to get ads that are maybe more relevant to my lifestyle as opposed to random ads for stuff I don't really care about, and that's part, and in order to have that happen, which is useful for me, useful ads, ads that interest, that meet my interest in terms of what I'm my hobbies or my work or whatever, am I willing to give up some, I guess, privacy. In order to get that?
I am. I mean, I know Raley sends me coupons or gives us electronic coupons all the time based on our shopping habits.
Sure.
And it's like, hey, I can get a 6-pack of Pellegrino for like $1 off. I'm like, I love Pellegrino. Obviously, they know how much I buy because I scan my card every time, right? I mean, so it's there's already this idea, but yes, if they do it in the right way, it is valuable. I think the users, the customers out there like it. The problem becomes when it's used for what appears to be nefarious means. In this instance, it was a political means, and there's such controversy around political uses for data, and that's, let's face it, I mean, politicians and political campaigns use data a lot.
Right.
I mean, Obama, and they always have. I mean, it's gone back for decades now. It's very sophisticated data campaigns. So I don't know the answer to it, Dirk. I mean, I think the answer to me is it comes down to every individual person. Right. But the individual person has to realize that they're dealing with companies that have a business model that embraces that. And if you don't understand it, you should. And if you do understand it, you need to weigh it. I mean, do I want to participate and be part of their business model, get some benefits? Are the benefits worth it for me? If they are, okay, I'm going to give up the data. If not, I'm not.
And you're going to trust that. You're going to trust that they use it.
I don't know. I can't have you. Right now, it's hard. I mean, you can't know that. I mean, your data is out there.
Right.
And much less even it being hacked, even the idea of whether the data is secure. Just assuming that it's locked down tight and it's secured, and they're the only ones that can use it. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. They're not going to sell it to a political campaign that I don't like.
Right.
That's going to market to me and try to convince me of certain political ideas. I don't know that. But I don't mind it either. I don't care. I mean, I like reading ads because I'm in the advertising business, so I like to see how people present information.
They're making money with that?
Yeah, right. It's like I'm interested.
Give me a piece of that.
So I personally, I don't mind. I know how it's being used. It's not being used really for nefarious purposes, as far as I'm concerned. They're using it to sell me something. I'm like, whatever. If I don't want it, I won't buy it. So I don't care. But others, others care about it. So it depends on individuals, really. All right. Thanks, Rick. That was worth going a few minutes over, I think, for that. Okay. All right, well, that's our show for today. But before we close, of course, a big thank you to Scott Paton of Exemplar Global for joining us in the studio. Right at the top of today's show, very interesting information there. And thanks also to Chad Kymal of Omnex Inc. for Skyping in earlier today. Don't forget that Omnex and Quality Digest are joining forces for the webinar ISO 45001, released as an international standard, which is coming up on Tuesday, April 10th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Chad's going to be presenting, and Dirk is your host. So keep an eye on your email inbox for details on how you can register, or just check out Chad's article. It's right in the on the bottom of our page here.
And actually, there's also a link right. If you're on the player page, there's the big player page. There is a link down at the bottom underneath Chad's interview thing. Link to the webinar registration, so you can click that as well.
Check it out. All right. Well, you guys all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.